welcome back for another episode of Business and Life Stories with James and Mike. James is currently off gallivanting in the Highlands of New Zealand. I'm kidding. I only say stuff like that when he's not here. He is actually stuck in a major storm, and internet in New Zealand is just what you could imagine. When there's a storm, they got problems. Anyway, here this time with Jason Van Orden, who, if you haven't heard that name, you need to go look him up because he's one of the early adopters in podcasting, and he does all kinds of cool things that you folks need to hear about. So without further ado, welcome, Jason.
Hey there, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So tell folks a little bit about what you do, and gosh, you've been in this space for a long time, and you do marketing and business coaching. You kind of roll all this into one, but how in the world did you get started, and how'd you stumble across podcasting? Like, weren't you one of the first ones doing this?
Yeah, I got started in podcasting in 2005. So the story goes, I'll give the quick version of the story, and that is that I was an engineer for 3 years, learned very quickly I was unemployable, did not want to work for somebody else for the rest of my life. And so I started reading lots of books and magazines and listening to tapes, and it was tapes back then, in my Buick that I bought off my grandma. And I was trying to figure out other ways to make my way in life. And, entrepreneurship was one of those, investing was others I was listening to. And I stumbled my way into real estate investing at first, actually. But more, I did okay at real estate investing. It wasn't really my bag. And what I enjoyed more was actually marketing. I'd been in a band for many years, and over several years of being in rock bands and trying to get people to my shows and to buy my CDs, I'd learned about marketing, and actually pretty good at it, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And so with all my real estate investing buddies and colleagues that I'd hang out with, they'd always be picking my brain about marketing. Like, hey, we got to find buyers and sellers to put our deal. We know how to make the deals, but we need the people to make the deals. So I started teaching them about direct marketing and figured out that people were really, there was a lot of value there that I could offer. So I put the dots together and thought, I think I want to try doing some kind of seminar or workshop, see if I can make some money teaching this stuff. So I rented out a room at a community college. I got my hands on a mailing list, physical mailing list of 83 people that were real estate investors in the local area where I was at. Sent out a sequence, just used my direct marketing skills and experience, sent out a sequence of mailers to them, and managed to fill the room with 25 people and made $8,000 in one day, basically giving a crash course on marketing for real estate investors. And that was just like the heavens opened up or something. Like, this is amazing. I love teaching. I just got paid well to teach. I don't have to go. I'd already, crossed out the possibility of going to be a professor, because like that'll just drive me nuts, just like being employed by anybody. But here's a way I can get paid to teach and do something I really love. So I had recorded that course and started selling it locally, but eventually that led me online. I'm like, I need more people to sell this to. So this is now 2004 at the time. So there's no social media, there's no Facebook or YouTube or any of these things. It was just basically hanging out on forums and giving, answering questions. And then I'd have my byline that would promote my course for me. But I knew I needed to find new ways to market and build up a following for my marketing for real estate investors business. And that's when, at the very beginning of 2005, I stumbled upon this word, podcasting. It was in an email newsletter that I was reading one day, and it's like, what is this podcasting? It sounds interesting. So I typed it into Google, and Google correct, because Google didn't know what it was at the time. It said, did you mean fly casting? I'm like, nope, I don't fish. I'm trying to figure out how to make a podcast. And I did stumble upon many different, number of different blog posts at the time that were, they're very geeky stuff. It was like digging into RSS feeds and MP3 enclosures and like very techie. But I had an engineering background. I was a coder. I had an audio background as a musician. I had a marketing and business background as a consultant. So like it all just kind of converged in my brain. I thought, this is really cool. I think I want to be at the forefront of the podcasting thing. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but let's give it a go. So I launched a website in 2005 that was like, in layman's terms, A to Z, here's how you can launch a podcast. Just banking on the fact that more people are going to want to do this. And right now it's really hard to find the information you need. There weren't any of the easy services that we have today for doing it. And I guess people found the site useful, and so did Google, who didn't know what podcasting was when I searched, but now Google is listing it up right there at number one for how to podcast. And so I started building up an audience, and that led to a book deal and speaking internationally and consulting people on how to start podcasts for their businesses. Now, concurrently with that, I launched 2 or 3 podcasts. Just I was like, trying to figure things out, see what I could do. And one of them was the very first podcast about internet business and online entrepreneurship. I started it with a buddy of mine, mostly just as a passion project to try out the medium of podcasting. But it took off through a combination of maybe timing and just hitting a tone and voice at the right time that people found useful. It started gaining an audience, and within a couple of years, people started asking, do you have courses? Do you have coaching? Can you teach us to do what you do? Because my co-host, he was making money on eBay. I was selling my course online and dabbling in other things online. So we were just 2 guys talking about, this is what we're doing to make money online and forge our own path in life. And eventually it turned into a full-blown educational company for beginning entrepreneurs. And so I put aside my other pursuits and went all in on that business for the next 12 years. And it went, quite well. We had quite a nice audience, all these different courses and coaching programs that we would sell. Things are going well. It was a lifestyle business, but as many entrepreneurs do, after a while, I started getting itchy, ready for something else. And so that's when about 6 years ago now, I left that business and struck out to try something new. And what I decided to do is take all of my knowledge about online marketing, direct marketing, creating media and content online. I'd made lots of online courses at that point. And I started working with established experts, established coaches and consultants, and teaching them, like, how can they get their ideas out in a bigger way? Because that was something I really enjoyed in that business I had before, were the people that didn't just want to start a business, but they showed up with like a story or a message or a methodology or a thing that they just felt compelled to share with the world. And I was like, I want to work with more of those people, and the ones that have already got some traction doing that, and now they're just trying to figure out how to go bigger. I'm a strategist. I'm a good marketer. I can help them create new income streams. And so that's where I find myself now 6 years later, is working with established coaches and consultants to develop the next evolution of their business model when they're ready to go from more just this one-to-one model to a more one-to-many, and they want to take things bigger in how they reach people, bigger in how they deliver their value to their customers through income streams like group courses, online digital courses and things like that. So that's the quick chronology of what brought me to what I do now and what it is that I do now.
Wow, that's really cool. And that's most of our audience are people, they're right on that cusp of getting their second round of funding and they're ready to go bigger. So I knew you'd be perfect for this.
Awesome.
What is tell us about the 3 Ps on your website. And when you talk about things like position or platform and that concept, do you mean it the way Jack Trout meant it in his famous series of positioning books from like the 60s onward, or do you have a different take on that?
Well, it's definitely founded in a similar idea. So what you're referring to on my website is that I work with my clients in 3 areas: positioning, platform, and product. And I know you have lots of startups that follow this show. I work a lot with coaches and consultants, but a lot of what I teach applies really to any business, and positioning is important no matter what business you're in. And the Jack Trout and Al Ries book is definitely a seminal work on positioning. Of course, that's now also decades old. And so positioning on the internet is a little bit of a different game. And so now it's like we have different tools, and attention spans have changed, and what people are used to has changed. But in the end, it does come down to being clear in the mind of the people that you want to reach, what it is that you offer, who it is that you serve, what's the value that you bring to them, why you are the best solution for them, and helping them see that it's something that they should consider buying into now, or subscribing to, or investing in, or whatever it might be now, as opposed to sometime later, because you show them that there's a real opportunity cost to doing nothing, or to not taking action and doing business with you. And so today, positioning with my clients is a lot about doing, and this is important with startups too. It's about doing what's often referred to as good customer discovery. And that is getting inside the mind of the market that you want to serve. And there's a great quote from, now I'm blanking. Is it Claude Hopkins? Anyway, the 1930s, I believe the quote comes from. It says, always enter the conversation already going on in the mind of your prospect. And, positioning, sometimes they taught it as this way of basically putting a position in the mind of your of your prospective market. But I think it is that, but I think even more so, it's that entering of the conversation that's already going on. What are they waking up thinking about in the morning? What are they going to sleep thinking about at night? What's the language that they use when they talk about their unfulfilled goals and their desires, their needs, their problems, their pains, their challenges, that they're looking for value, instruction, support, value, solutions to help them to address these things. And so when they come across you in this very noisy online environment, are you immediately relevant, meaning that you do address a top of mind pain or need or desire, and resonant? And this is something I don't think they talked about, because there's so much more noise now. You need to also be resonant. You need to be communicating in a way that immediately just feels like you're talking my language. You're inside my head. You have similar values to me. You not only have a solution that feels relevant to me, but you'd go about doing it in a way that really aligns with who I am as a consumer. And that's something that more and more consumers want these days, is to have that kind of alignment with the people that they do business with.
So what are some things that you've learned to do for yourself that you can share about? So you have the idea, you know what you're trying to do. You got a pretty good idea what you think your customer's conversation in their head is. And how do you go about testing if you're being resonant?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one of my favorite ways to do that is that you get out there on a channel there's a number of ways you can choose any channel. That's a great thing about internet, is that I'll get out there on like LinkedIn, for instance, and I'll try a little post out with certain language or a certain story or analogy or approach, or I'll give you an example. So the other day, I posted on LinkedIn this idea of revenue capacity. And I'm not sure if that's a phrase that gets used, but the way I think of it, especially with coaches and consultants, they set, it's the beginning, as we're recording this, the beginning of a year, 2022, a lot of people have set an income goal, right? And a lot of my clients, I've been talking to them about what are your income goals and growth goals for 2022. But then the second question needs to be, does your business model have the revenue capacity to generate that income? So in other words, if we took all of your offers, whatever those are, the consulting client capacity that you have, the courses and programs you might run throughout the year, and in a conservative way, say, what if all those sold out and you were filled to capacity with clients? Does that even reach the number that you have put out there, right? And if the answer is no, well, then clearly one of the first things we need to do is, how do we increase revenue capacity? Now, if you've got a startup that's a tech startup, scalability might not be as much of an issue. I mean, one subscriber to your app versus 100 versus 1,000 is mostly about scaling infrastructure. And not that that's a small thing, but when you're a person that one-to-one is delivering the value as a consultant or coach, suddenly you're faced with this ceiling on your income. It's like, how do I break through that in a way that I can serve more people? So to get back to my original point, I was like, you know what, this is an interesting idea after I had this conversation with a client. So I went and I posted about revenue capacity in this story, and had a lot of people going like, just immediately responding to it, like, I've never thought of it that way. I've never heard that phrase before. I really like this. This is making me think. So I knew I was on to something that was resonant. People thinking, yeah, I have my income goal, but I'm not sure how exactly I'm going to go about reaching it, or if it's possible given my current business model. So to answer your question, the great thing about the internet is you get to test these things and little sound bites and little pieces of content. When something really starts hitting, it's like, okay, now I can turn that into a thought leadership piece, or a white paper, or a case study, or a webinar, or a workshop, or what, I start developing that idea out because I can tell that it's resonant in the language that I'm using to talk about it.
Wow. So this really set up, you're talking about using social media to do a lot of split testing on phrases and posts, and that's really powerful. So what would you tell people that are posting and not getting a lot of response? Where do they start thinking about what to change?
Well, the first thing I'd say is go and book 12. I mean, that's kind of an arbitrary number, a dozen conversations with your ideal prospect. So that could be people you're currently working with, prospects who have been thinking about working with you. And then it should be some people that maybe are hearing about you for the first time, but you still know that they fit your customer avatar, as we sometimes say, right? So you have those conversations with them, and not conversations like, hey, what kind of product would you like? Because people don't know. It's the classic Ford, hey, what do you guys want? Faster horses. It's like, no, what you really want is a car. But what you do is you ask them about their experiences, their frustrations. What are things like? What have they tried? What didn't work? Why are they afraid to move forward on a thing? What costs are holding them back, or potential? So you're getting the the landscape and kind of reading the tea leaves, so to speak. And what you're looking for is like, what are the gaps? What are the gaps between where they're at, where they want to go, and why they're not getting there yet? And then you as the expert can start thinking, okay, well, here's how I can fill those gaps with my solution. And more importantly, through those 12 conversations, I take lots of notes. I'm writing down exact things that they say, right? And so when I'm talking about revenue capacity, like I know the language to use in a post like that. I'm feeling so limited. I want to go bigger, but I feel so limited. I'm completely maxed out. I don't know. I've raised my prices as much as I can. Like these are all the things that I hear people say at that point when they're ready to work with me to go bigger, right? So you do those interviews, write that language down, figure out what that gap is, identify, where are they at? Why is that? Where are they at? Where they want to go? Why is that important to them? What's the gap in between? And then talk about those things in your messaging and craft your offers and value propositions to be a dead-on match. So that's the relevance piece, and the resonance piece is the language that they use to describe those things.
So you feel like a lot of early stage companies get that backwards? Because I certainly do. There's so much focus on the product or the service, and there's
And the number one reason research has showed us that startups fail is there's no need for the product. And it's a really simple way to fix that is you go and you figure out, well, what are the actual needs of the people we're trying to help or reach as our customers? And whether it's they don't do the interviews at all and that research at all, then they don't get that, or they do it and they ask the wrong questions. They lead the witness and they, so to speak, right? They ask questions where it's like they end up getting the answer they want to hear because people like to be nice and say what they think you want to hear. You have to ask the right questions to get data that's not going to give you bad assumptions or make it easy as a founder to go, just that validates my idea. Off we go here, right? They said, and I always, when I'm teaching customer discovery, I love showing that short clip in that HBO TV show Silicon Valley at the end of season 1. The character Jared is like out on the street because they think they need to pivot quickly in their compression algorithm. Like our app needs to do something else quick, and he's out there. So if we could help you find rats, I'm not telling you what to do with rats. If I could tell you right now how to find rats for whatever purpose you want, is that something you'd be interested in? Yes or no? Yes or no? Right? And like that's it's exaggerated, right? And it's funny to watch in this TV show, but in a way, that's what people do. They're like, I've got this great idea. What do you think if it were to do this and this and this? And it's like, that's not going to get you the data you need. You need to understand people's lives and stories and the language and their experiences and what they're struggling with. And then from that, you make your best guess at a minimum viable product solution, and then you iterate and you test it in the market as quickly as possible, right? So that's where I see people go. That's some of the places I see people go astray when it comes to that piece of the puzzle.
That's really good observations, and I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. So when you're talking about things like you help a lot of coaches, right? All these online courses and things. For early stage company that's more product focused or more service focused, what are questions that people should be asking when they're looking for a coach or they're trying to find a coach? There's a lot of coaches out there.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I mean, I think here's the thing is often, so here's what I'll say is like I run a lot of masterminds. I facilitate these groups where it's groups of coaches, consultants, founders, entrepreneurs, and it's a mind trust, right? Somebody brings a challenge to the group, they ask a question, and everyone tries to see if they can help out with insights, feedback, connections, and so forth, right? And the problem that often happens is that somebody presents their problem, we take it at face value, everyone wants to sound smart, they just jump in and start trying to solve the problem, right? Oh, well, here's what, it's like the person's like, I need to grow my email list. Let's just give a, basic, easy example of I need to grow my email list, right? It's like, oh, I know, you got to start a podcast, work great for me, right? And the step that gets skipped in there is there's no clarifying questions. Nobody's asking to like, okay, well, tell us why you think that's it. Why is that important to you? Why do you think you need to grow your list right now? What resources do you have to work with? Are you even interested in starting a podcast? Maybe something else would be. And so to come back to your question, you want a coach that's going to ask good questions, right? So if in your, doing those, there are lots of different words for it, just call a chemistry call, whatever, and you're testing out whether somebody might be a good fit. If they're not asking you good questions to make sure you're asking the right question yourself of them, then you haven't found the right person. And I do think it comes down to both. I would go back to the relevance and resonance. I mean, obviously, if you want, say a growth expert for software startups, obviously find somebody who has experience in that and a proven track record in that, but then pay attention to the resonance piece too. It's like, do I feel like I have a good value fit here? Do I feel like we vibe well? Do I feel like, I mean, I just did a call with a potential client tonight, and I appreciate it. One of the last questions he asked me was like, do you feel like we're a good fit? And, I gave him an honest answer. And so, I think that's something that gets skipped. We go for like the experience and the accolades but is the person even the right fit for who you are and what you need and what you're trying to do? And are they willing to apply their knowledge in a way that is not a formula? Anybody is trying to sell you a formula, run the other way. There is no formula. Yes, it worked for them, does not mean it's going to work for you. And if all they're doing is saying, do what I did and it'll be the same, like that's it drives me nuts when people like, find somebody who did what you did and then just do what they did. And it's like, no, the timing is different. Their strengths are different. Their values are different. Their resources are different. That's not how it works. But if you can find somebody who's been there and done it and knows how to turn what they did into a framework that's based on principles, but then you get to layer on top of it who you are and what you want. And, that's the kind of combination that you're going for. So those are a few insights I could offer when it comes to finding that right coach or mentor for your business.
Yeah, we run across that a lot in our business, early stage companies, and we know they need coaches in one area or another. And that's always been a question for us. And how do we get them connected to the right person?
Right.
And we intuitively kind of fell into it backwards of just thinking about getting the right fit. But you've really made that clear for our listeners, I think, in a way that we haven't made it as clear before. It's like the right questions is important, but I hadn't until this moment thought about it of, is the potential coach going to ask you the right questions as part of that initial call?
Right.
Really going to start pushing on you. I had a drill sergeant that did that, and he was really, really good at his job. But that was a while ago.
Nice.
So when you're thinking about potential clients and the people you're going to help, what are some of the people you're looking for? Like, who are some people we should be sending your way?
All right. Well, I appreciate that question. And this is something everybody should be defining, right? And just because I can't help myself, turn this into a little bit of a teaching moment. Had you asked me that question 5 or 6 years ago when I left my last company, I didn't know. And that was okay. Like I did a variety of consulting, had lots of conversations, tried a lot of things out, tried to figure out where I could offer the best value and get the best results. And I figured it out now. Like right now, I work with coaches and consultants. They've probably been in business at least a couple years, maybe a few years. They're getting great results. Sometimes they've been doing what they do for even a decade, 2 decades or whatever. They know who they serve. They know how to get good results. They probably are working with them one-to-one or doing maybe, small in-person workshops, or they've written some books, or they've done, but now they want to go to that go bigger. Like they've been so focused on becoming an expert, as they should be, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate and brand, communicate the marketing messaging and brand themselves and put together digital strategy, or even strategize at all. I mean, you can be really brilliant at what you do, but really have no idea the logistics. I mean, just think of you could have the most brilliant dentist or orthodontist or something, but they're probably not a great marketer in my experience, right? So it's it's those people. It's like, okay, now I need that outside view, somebody who is a strategist, somebody who does have that long experience of putting the pieces together in the right way to know what to focus on to get to where I'm going. And so usually the person that is ready to work with me is that person, and they want to go bigger in reach, and they also want to go bigger in how they deliver their value proposition. So going from one-to-one to some form of one-to-many. Maybe they've been getting lots of great referrals and had no problem getting clients, but as soon as you want to go bigger, okay, well, that's a different story. Now we need to grow an email list. Now we need messaging that's going to appeal to a wider mass of people, and so that's where I come in and help optimize the positioning, platform, and products, going back to those 3 Ps that we touched on earlier, for that person's business model in order to develop the next evolution of their business.
So do you see more product in terms of innovation, or somebody's putting a new twist on an existing thing, or do you see more actual original products?
Unfortunately, I mean, and I think it's true in a lot of would-be businesses that want to go big, is you see a lot of, I mean, copycat might be a strong word, but we tend to do a lot of the same of what we've already seen, or somebody comes along with what they think is a great idea, but again, they haven't actually asked the question, is there a need for this thing I think is a great idea.
Yeah, we see a lot of that. A lot. It's
Um, so, but here's the thing that I tell people these days, because a lot of people get hung up, since I do work in ideas and people who are bringing their expertise to bear. A lot of times they're like, well, there's already a lot of people who do what I do. Why should I think I could stand out any more than them? But and this is where positioning has changed since Jack Trout and Al Reese, because now we have the internet, which, for all intents and purposes is like infinite choice. We have all this shelf space. And the analogy I use is Spotify. I love listening to new music. I'm always trying to find new music, and we all have different musical tastes. Go back 20, 30 years, it was top 40 radio, and whatever was on the shelf space at your CD store is what you would get exposed to, right? Now on Spotify, I can go and search for jazz klezmer. Now, some people listening to this might be like, okay, I've heard of jazz, never heard of klezmer, let alone jazz klezmer together as a genre.
I've got a whole CD of jazz klezmer.
Do you really?
I do.
Is it Django Reinhardt, or what?
That sounds right. I haven't listened to it in a while, but yeah, I read about it in Classical Music magazine that the BBC puts out.
That's awesome.
Like, I got to get
great.
That. Yeah, it was really fun.
That's so cool. But yeah, so you can search that in Spotify, and you're going to find somebody who's put a playlist together of that, right? So it's like nowadays people know when it comes to the information, the entertainment, the support, the community, the different things that we look for online, we can find the flavor, the genre, the jazz klezmer, quote unquote, that fits us. So coming back to what I was saying about the expert who's like, who am I to put myself out there? It's like, well, you have your own perspective and approach. And yes, you might teach and do some of the same things that other people do, but you're going to bring to bear a different way of thinking about it and doing it. Or maybe somebody's going to choose to do business with you because they see more of themselves in you than the next person, that they've, or the previous person that they've talked to. So you are somebody's jazz klezmer, and now people know that they can find that. So the thing that I tell people is to really lean into that resonance side. It's not just about having a solution that's relevant, but it's like figure out your voice as a marketer, as a brand. And you've got brands out there that are really good at this, brands like Patagonia and Whole Foods and, well, Apple, that's an obvious one, right? So there's a resonance there. There are a lot of reasons people are Apple customers, and it's not just the relevant products that they sell, right? So how can you be that as a personal brand as well? There are lots of CEOs out there, but Elon Musk, everybody know, of course, he's the richest guy in the world, but also like he's got a personal brand. There are CEOs who have personal brands. They've leaned into their voice. They know what they're saying and doing to the world. And whether they're at the head of this company today or this company tomorrow, they are that brand. And so that's the era that we live in now, and what's available to us when it comes to that positioning, whether it's for us as a person or for a product or for a company at large.
So I kind of asked to explore the jazz guitar a little bit.
Sure.
Well, it sounds like maybe some of your expertise is developed out of being a musician, because every musician is unique.
Right.
And here in Austin, we have a embarrassment of riches when it comes to really great musicians.
Yes.
Yeah, whether I hear Ernie Dewar playing the drums or whether it's somebody else playing the drums, they're all Grammy winners, but whoever's sitting in the session that night, it's like the music changes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a great analogy, because in jazz, when I was learning jazz guitar and you're learning to solo, at first, you got to learn the rules, and you learn other people's, you mimic other soloists, other improv soloists, right? And as soon as I do that, or as I started songwriting, like my first songs, they all sounded like grunge, like Tool and Pearl Jam, because that's what I was listening to at the time. But bit by bit, I started finding my own voice by taking those things and morphing them and mixing them up. And so, maybe there is a period that a business goes through where you do sound or look like other things out there, but eventually you do find your place. And in all of it. And so I like this music analogy path that we've gone down here. But you're right, that my musician past has definitely influenced a lot who I am as a personal brand, and also as a coach, as a consultant.
So I saw on your website you said something that you met your wife in a band. So that sounded like a really interesting story.
Oh yeah.
Was it instant where you guys just knew, or did you have to work at this? Or
Yeah, actually, I probably need to update my website because I'm actually not married to her anymore.
I'm sorry. Oh my gosh.
No, no, it's totally okay though. It is an interesting story, and one that I like to tell. We were back in college, and I'll tell this story very quickly because it's kind of fun. But I was in a little college town, and in that college town, people might not know who. So there was Randy Bachman, his business, Bachman Turner Overdrive. The song that everyone would know is "Taking Care of Business," right? It's an
classic song.
So I had a band at the time, Mercury Blue, in our college town, and we got lots of gigs. We had this, kind of very attractive powerhouse voice guy that sang for us. And this is like when you've got NSYNC and Backstreet Boy, like there's definitely a good swell, good swell of boy bands coming on, right? So funny enough, Randy Bachman's daughter and son went to the same college as us and were friends with him. And when they saw our band play, they hooked him up with their dad, who then said, "Come to Canada. I want to try to make and I have no idea if anything ever came of that. He quit the band because he's like, "I'm going to go be in the next boy band now." And it left us in a lurch. And we're like, "Oh my God, we don't have anybody to sing for our band anymore. What are we going to do?" Thankfully, I thought of this woman that I had been, who was my wife, who became my wife at the time, was in a jazz band that I was in for a short while. And I remember, well, she's got a great voice and a good presence on stage. Maybe I can try to track her down because we've got gigs coming up and we need a new singer. Anyway, as you can imagine, often happens in bands, you're working together closely and performing and writing music together and, things like that. And sometimes relationships form. And so yeah, we ended up and then even after we got married, we were in like a couple different rock bands for a while too. We're really serious about it for a while. So yeah, music has been a through line throughout my life, and business and marriages and relationships and all kinds of things like that. But that's the story on that one.
I love those. And James isn't here tonight, but he was a professional blues guitarist for a long time. Nice. And it's always been something for me, going to engineer school and, trying to date actual girls and all that was always challenging. So.
Yeah. And I was in engineering school, but I was a guitarist, an engineer who played guitar. So
there you go. Well, I was an engineer who punched punch cards to make my programs go. Yeah, I love going out with my wife and go dance and listen to all kinds of music. And yeah, I met her because I had hit town. We'd all been laid off. Our company laid off 10,000 people in one day.
Yikes.
So I came to sponge off my brother for a while, as you do. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, go talk to this girl. She's in the engineering world." So I went, took my resume back when we had actual paper resumes.
Yep.
And she never looked at that resume, and I wasn't really paying attention to anything except her blue eyes.
And the rest is history, as they say.
There you go. So yeah, we're about ready at wrapping up the interview. Do you have any final words for the audience? We had lockdowns, we got shutdowns, we had all kinds of stuff going on. People are trying to hold it together. So you've given us a lot of great things to do and work on. But throughout your years as a musician and what you're doing now in the masterminding, is there one or two single points that can help people deal with those feelings of frustration and pulling their hair out and all the great stuff that goes along with being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. Entrepreneurship can certainly be like an isolated, lonely thing sometimes, because especially in a time like this. Now, I've been in a business where I've been working at home on my own for a long time. I did have a business partner before, right? But it can feel very isolating, especially when, your family members, your friends, they might not be in entrepreneurship. And so you don't get to geek out on stuff like you want to or whatever. And when you run into those challenges of sales or marketing or product development or funding or whatever, it's like, who do you go to talk to about it? So, it's so key to have those relationships and to have those little and big communities that you're a part of. We met through a common contact, and that's why I like showing up to these things that we met at, that I get invited to, because it's so key to just be talking to people and have both those really close connections. Like if something went really awry in my business tomorrow, I can think of people who would definitely get on the phone with me right away and jam it out with me, so I wasn't just like stuck there in my brain and anxiety trying to figure it out. And then even like newer, looser connections that I still learn interesting things from, or go on their podcast, or we chat now and again on LinkedIn, and all of that really adds up to opportunities and support and insight and innovation and bumping into things you wouldn't otherwise, that then suddenly become that key thing your business needs because they've got brought from another industry, and you're like, I've never thought of doing it that way. What if I applied that to what I'm doing? And that it all comes down to those communities and conversations and relationships. So I guess that's one of the key things I'd say. And even in a quarantined pandemic world, even more so, there's a need for that connection. And I started doing networking events myself on a monthly basis, to bring people together. And so whether you go find those communities or create one yourself, because if you're the connector, and anybody can do it, I don't know why more people don't do it. If you're the connector, it just automatically starts paying off in dividends. So I think if I were to give advice, it'd be, don't isolate yourself, and don't forget to invest in that part of things, because I've looked over my, my history as an entrepreneur, and certainly the times where I feel more like things shrink or grow, that is one common element is am I actively fostering that part of my as a business owner, or am I letting it stagnate and kind of, isolating into my own world, doing my own thing and just trying to grind it out in this like rugged independent way, which just doesn't work in the end. So that would be my parting advice, I guess, along those lines.
Well, that sounds like really great advice. So what is the best way for people to reach you? Would you prefer them to go through your website, through your LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to me anytime, jason@jasonvanorden.com. But my website's a great place to go, and certainly get on my newsletter. That's where, if any of the stuff I've talked about today has got your brain thinking, that's where I talk about these things or put new ideas out. We talked about testing new things out for Resonance. Email list is another place I do that. So I'd love to invite people to do that. Sign up for my newsletter if that sounds interesting to them. And then if you're on LinkedIn, come find me. I love making connections there as well. So those are the best ways to connect with me.
Perfect. And those links are down below this video, folks. So thanks for being here, Jason. Really appreciate all your time.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.